Change can be scary, as COVID has been for all of us. But change can also be a time of hope and achievement if we build the skills to harness it. As students today, we have great aspirations for our future and the difference we will make to the world. At the same time, we're also filled with a little fear. Will we be ready for this new world? What do we need to do beyond our academics to reach our aspirations and to handle our fears? Today's experts will help us answer these questions. Technology has changed and will continue to change and transform every workplace and career. We must learn to build that technology quotient. Constant change means we will always need to learn and learn and learn some more, hence building our learnability quotient. And finally, we will discover that the more human we are, the better prepared we are to face the future with confidence. TalentEase is proud to bring a very relevant and important topic today, from the classroom to the workplace, the skills we need to succeed. With great pleasure, we'd like to welcome our esteemed speakers to this webinar. Welcome Dr. Ajit Tarakan, Sumitra Rathod, and Karen Walls. Thank you for being here today. Whether we love it or absolutely fear it, we can't escape the grips of technology. Dr. Ajit, can you please give us a little bit of an insight into the technology quotient?
Sure, Yantel, and thank you for a very nice introduction. Good evening and welcome to everyone in India and around the world. It's really a pleasure to be at this webinar. As I've seen TalentEase grow over the years, and it serves one of the very important roles in the field of education. My assignment today is Technology Quotient, and it's a phrase which has been used more in recent times to assess the ability of a person to be able to assimilate to technology. And I was talking to my daughter the other day, and she was saying, does technology conform to you, or do you conform to technology? Maybe something that we will have to see in the coming years with artificial intelligence being, a lot of work being done on artificial intelligence. But as far as the medical field goes, the patient is the most important person in the healthcare system. And all our technology, the intelligence and emotional quotient should all work in tandem to help serve the needs of our patients. Technology has impacted almost all aspects of medical care, starting from outpatient care, all types of testing, how instruments and the operating room gadgets work, electronic medical records, the large data that analytics required, pharmacy and home care. I have a few slides just to show and tell how technology has impacted medicine. Just 1 second while I screen share here. So this is my team at Oklahoma Heart Institute. If you see the image at the bottom, this is my operating team. And the patient is in the right here in the middle, and the heart's in the middle. But if you look at the room around, there is a perfusion machine that is a cardiopulmonary bypass circuit, and there's an expert perfusionist who is skilled and with the knowledge set to run this machine. And this is connected through a tube and a pipe to the patient, where we take blood out of the patient and then oxygenate and return it back to him. Now, this is one of the machines commonly seen in our room. And then you look at this one. This is a transesophageal echocardiogram. This technology required to see how the heart functions, and it's connected to a patient through a small probe that sits at the back of the heart. And behind me is the anesthesia machine, where the anesthetist is able to deliver anesthesia while we are able to do the work on the patient. So with advancing technology, it's important to acquire these skills and the ability to integrate this data from technology, and that ability to do that is called the technology quotient. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how technology has impacted us and directly impacts my work. Let me start with this most recent COVID pandemic. We've had several patients like this, but I'll give you a typical example. We had a 40-year-old patient who came to us with breathing difficulty, was COVID positive, and and she progressively had worsening lung function, and a ventilator was not adequate to support her gas exchange. So now this patient would have died if we did not do anything, because the ventilator is also not working. So we have this machine, it's called an extracorporeal oxygenator, and it's been developed over the last decade, and it's really come to fruition now, by which we put a cannula, which requires excellent X-ray visualization, and this sits by a small incision in the neck. It sits close to the heart, and with the help of an echocardiogram, we're able to get blood out of the patient, oxygenate it, and return it to the patient. Now, this is one of our patients. He's connected to this machine, is standing up and walking, quite unimaginable, like even a couple of years ago. And this patient, he got better, and she went on home. And that's one of the ways we've really been impacted by the improvements in technology. Another patient in my clinic is a typical 65-year-old gentleman who came to me with chest pain. We did our CT scan and MRI, and then did a cardiac functional assessment before we decided that the patient needs surgery. Now, this is an MRI, and if you can see, this is the aorta. Aorta is a tube that takes blood out of the heart, and this aorta has become big and dilated, and that is called an aneurysm. So once you reach a certain stage, that can rupture and take a patient's life. So she needs surgery. Now, this is a patient of mine who we did a open surgery about 15 years ago. And this is a good size cut on the patient's side. You get to the aorta, cut the aorta out, and put a tube graft to support that circulation. Now, over the last decade or so, we've been able to do that with minimally invasive techniques. Make a small incision in the groin under X-ray guidance. We're able to deploy this is a stent graft. It is a Dacron graft, which is supported by a nitinol frame, and it's crimped into a small tube and sent up the patient's vascular system. I usually make a small cut in the groin, and then with X-ray guidance, we're able to seat it anywhere in the vascular system. And this technology has extended to portions of the heart. Now we can deploy heart valves now without having to open a patient's chest, a place where technology has really helped us. So this component of Technology Quotient, now I grew up and initially trained in the when large technology boom happened in the last 2 decades. And you could call me a slow learner. It took a while before I was able to be amazed by this kind of work. And I think it is important that folks and all of us who are able to handle technology well, that serves our patients and human needs as much. So I'll stop talking now. So if you have any questions, I'll take, so there's some time for some discussion. It is a pleasure to be at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Those were some pretty intense pictures as well, apart from the technology. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
We have a question for you. So at many of our sessions, many children state their aspiration to be a doctor. Did you want to be a doctor when you were younger? And how did you pursue this course?
So yes, I have almost always wanted to be a doctor, but part of it is the way we grew up initially with I had some excellent education at Don Bosco Egmore in Chennai, and with the encouragement of my parents, and we had excellent teachers also, teachers of the science, and then I got tracked into the line of medicine. But it's when I started interacting with the patients that really that you're able to impact people's lives at a time when they are in pain and have some suffering. It makes you want to come back. It's a very gratifying thing, and compassion a required portion of any person who wants to be a doctor. And then the other part of it is the science and now technology. It keeps growing, and even after 30 years in this business, it's still, I go back every day, still amazed at how the heart starts beating. I've done several thousand of these operations now, but every time heart stops and restarts, it's just still an amazing feeling to see that happen. So I really encourage, we do need good doctors at all times. So science, and I encourage all of you to join, to be part of this profession. It's an excellent profession.
That's very reassuring to hear. Thank you for saying those words. You studied in Chennai, Bangalore, Vellore, and then which led to securing your residency at Massachusetts General Hospital, Boston Children's Hospital. What were some of the skills you had, and what were the few that you developed during this process of transition?
One of the best aspects of education, at least when I grew up, was that there's a culture, and I grew up in India and in Madras, and there's a culture of education. Every child is expected to study, go back, do homework, excel in class, and that really has set the foundation for the next step. And I think that's the most important part of which helped me go to the next level. And then this inquiring mind. You want to learn more, and then you go from one step to the other. And at each of these stages, I've come through mentors who have been extremely helpful to me. My parents are my greatest mentors. Beyond that, we've had teachers at every stage of my career who have been extremely supportive. I think Mass General was a great place to work. There's a long tradition and history, and I have learned a lot during these. I trained for almost 12, 13 years before I got into practice, and another 15 years in practice. So it's been a very gratifying thing. I think to be able to this technology quotient, I think, is an important part, that you're able to absorb and absorb technology into your daily activities, computers, data, and analysis of data. That has been is an important part of every as you learn and grow from one step to the other.
Right, thank you. I'm going to quickly go to one of the audience questions that have come in.
Sure.
Yeah. It says, how reliable is technology in the medical field with regard to minute surgeries that require human component?
It's a very valid question. I think technology has to work the way you expect it to work. Any technology, before it reaches human phases, goes through several trials. There's a first stage where there's a proof of concept. After that, say for example, if you devise a blood flow device, how do you make it happen? So there's a proof of concept. And after that, you have animal trials. And then after several animal trials, you get into the phases of human trials. And then there is human trials, which again usually goes to 3 to 5 years before it reaches all people at large. Any technology, before it reaches, at least in the last decade, has taken at least 10 years of work before a human actually sees that kind of work on you. So by then, it is perfected. I have not seen in my, it happens, but it's rare. You see it once a year, once in 2 years, that the things and technology that you use daily fails. But it's extremely reliable. The process is well done. So I think you have to trust the system, trust the process, and it works.
That's a great point. Thank you. And I guess we, as patients and people on the other side, don't realize how long it's vetted before it becomes, live. So thank you.
Correct.
Thank you for sharing your inputs with us on Technology Quotient. We shall come back to you in a little while. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
There was a time when people stayed in one company, in one institution, in one job, literally, for their whole life. Things sure have changed since then, but one thing that hasn't is change. Let's listen to Sumitra as he gives us an insight into learnability quotient. Sumitra?
Thank you, Yantel. I'm delighted to be here today and happy to share my observations on the relevance of the learnability quotient in today's environment. It's a broad topic and we'll only be able to skim the surface, but hopefully the brief introduction will interest all you listeners to explore this in more detail later. Now, from the corporate lens, identifying individuals with the ability and desire to learn has grown in prominence. If you look at the hiring of new graduates today, companies look at two things, and I am oversimplifying here. One, whether you have the relevant degree or basic training in the area you're entering. That's fairly clear and obvious, right? Two, your personality. This personality aspect has traditionally been to gauge whether you will fit in with your colleagues and with the corporate culture. And of rising significance now, this tries to see what is your desire and ability to learn. Now, here, when we say learning, the term is used in the broad sense of the word. It can be a specific training, technical capability, a behavioral skill, a tool, a language, anything. It can be building on existing knowledge, something altogether new. Okay. So, just how important has learnability become? In 2018, about 15 corporate giants, including Google, IBM, Apple, said that they no longer required employees to have college degrees, with research supporting that learnability, adaptability, and attitude were better indicators of successful employees. And this reason for the focus on learnability is also quite clear. A degree will lay the foundation, but to perform the job well, you have to learn the intricacies. And also recognize that what you are hired for today is not what you will be doing in 5, 10, 20 years and beyond. The ability to learn isn't just to land your first job after college or university. It's relevant right from when you're a student. With the COVID-19 situation impacting in-class learning, I really wonder how many students were able to maximize the value from online learning. See, unfortunately, the pandemic didn't allow any time for schools and colleges and for students to prepare for a method that was thrust upon them. There isn't enough data yet, but I fear that the effectiveness of remote learning as a one-size-fits-all has been a lot lower than in-class schooling. If we now assess the learnability factors of all students, going forward, it'll help in the classroom and as well as will help in other extraordinary situations that like we're facing today. Let's come back to the business environment. Even well after you've started your first job, there's clearly learning needed. Whether you want to progress upwards, move to different areas, and in today's environment, even to just stay relevant in your current role. As Dr. Ajit described, and as you've seen all around you, technology constantly changes the work content of people. I'll give you an example from 50 years ago, and I'm choosing that for its simplicity. The development of the calculator meant that one or two bookkeepers could do the job of dozens. Something as simple as a calculator had such a far-reaching effect. It's an old example, but in its time, it was disruptive. But what's relevant today and no less disruptive are digitization, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robots. Not just robots, now we've moved to collaborative robots called cobots. With all of these come fewer errors, greater precision of output, a host of benefits. and different jobs. So, what do the people whose roles are impacted by these advancements do if they don't learn new skills? The desire and the ability to constantly learn and adapt is the only way to stay relevant. Also, what do companies do? They know that if they let go of the people with legacy skills and replace them with people with newer skills, they lose all the business knowledge that lies with the older staff. And in my experience, companies instead have chosen to invest in their employees to learn continuously. So that avenue is going to be available for you as you join the workforce. In fact, talent development is now a dedicated function across the board, all companies. Which then brings us to the measure on your approach to learning, the learnability quotient. Now, this is not quite the same as learning styles. Learning styles are things like visual, auditory, reading, physical. These tell us which teaching style should be adopted for an individual so that the learning process is most effective for that person. But learnability quotient is for us to identify how you, as an individual, approach learning. To do this, you assess where you lie on a number of parameters. Are you more theoretical? Do you go into the why of whatever it is you're trying to learn? Or are you more practical, more comfortable with the how of the subject? And there is middle ground too. You then review your personality traits. Are you introspective or trend towards extroversion? Now here too there's middle ground. When you overlay your preferences and personality, you can come up with your approach to learning, the learnability quotient. What you gain from this is to be self-aware of multiple things. Examples. Do you learn best in a structured, somewhat traditional manner? Is a practical, experience-based format better suited for you? Is your personality such that you learn best when you absolutely need to? Or as opposed to early when there's really no urgency? Do you thrive on the opportunity to learn something new altogether? Is that a driver for you? Or do you have a reluctance in something that goes beyond an extension of what you already know? Maybe staying in your comfort zone and moving in smaller increments is more palatable for you. Now you will observe here that there can be overlaps. It's not practical and not even the intent to put someone in a rigid learnability quotient box. These overlaps will reflect in multiple ways. You may like to learn in small increments, but learn it best through a classroom session, or not a classroom, but through a practical session, or maybe in a conference, or maybe even a combination of them. Some of us are better off learning individually and others in a group. You can reflect on your own education experience, where some of you may choose to study alone, while others study with friends. These are all learning styles, right? Are you better off with being instructor-led, or is self-learning something more suitable for you? Should it be in person or online? Several nuances, right? And the learnability quotient attempts to gauge the learning environment that is most compatible with your approach to learning. Once you understand the parameters that drive your learning, the better position you are in to capitalize on learning opportunities. There's the really old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's been established now that's not true. You cannot teach the old dog new tricks in the same way that you taught a pup. You have to now realize that the person has changed and the way the person learns has also changed. And it's not just for us to realize on their behalf. Ideally, you ought to look and see as to what works for you so that you are in a position to take full advantage. All right, let me conclude with these 2 quick points. First, keep in mind preferences change, personality traits change. And therefore, at different points in your life, you may find yourself with a different set of parameters for learnability. This is not a one and done. Please revisit it every few years. Second, this is applicable to all professions, and very importantly, it's applicable to all age groups. Well, with that, thank you for listening, and I hope you found this interesting.
My page is full of notes. Thank you. Very, very important points and lots to ponder upon and think about. I think reflection is the important part there, as well as your personality. Thank you, Sumitra. I would like to ask you a question here. Do you think your own learnability quotient has changed? What was it like when you were in school or college? And what is it like now?
I certainly believe it's changed. Um, when I was in school and college, unfortunately, at that point in time, there was not enough research available, at least in the Indian context, to recognize that children learn differently. Um, the focus was a lot on rote learning. You pretty much just had to know the content, and the ability to apply that content was not quite as important. Um, but knowing what I know now, and when I look at how I was as a child, um, I was far more practical based than theory, and far more, um, well, at least far less introvert than I am today. I would have thrived in an environment then that had me see new things. It's called the thrill seeker in that in the learning quotient. Um, and by doing things in time, when personalities change, etc., I'm now more introvertish than I was as a child. And I also now actually am more interested in the how, um, than in just the I'm more interested in the what. That is the theory behind it. What am I doing and why am I doing it, rather than just do it? And this becomes particularly relevant, at least as you move further along in the career, because if you're stuck with saying, I know how to do what I'm doing, but I don't really know fully why I'm doing it, you won't be able to effect change yourself, because you will just continue saying, this is the only way I know it because I've just been doing it. But if you understand the underlying theory behind it, you might actually wake up one day and say, hey, there's a better way of doing this. So, things have changed, personality has changed, and time has made the difference.
Thank you. We hear this very often, unlearning and relearning. Can you tell us what you would think about it, this statement?
Absolutely important. Now, obviously varies industry to industry. The extent of it varies. But if you look at technology, so when I started my career, we all programmed in COBOL. Then a few years later, the C language became hot. But if I had stuck with either of those, not shut it out of my mind and started all over again, I would have been obsolete today. Then you move to Java, and beyond Java, you move, there's really no, and especially in technology, you don't have the luxury to say, I do not need to relearn. And I'm, without stealing the thunder of Dr. Ajit, as he mentioned in his talk, and I'm picking up just from what he said, when he started, you had to cut a chest open to put in a valve in the heart, and now you don't. But every doctor in time has to learn how to do that, for their patients and for themselves. So it's not just a phrase, it's actual reality. There is the need to unlearn and relearn.
Thank you. Perfect. Great. We will leave you for a little bit. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your perspective.
Thank you.
No matter where we go or what we do, we definitely can't escape people. So people are ever present. Let's listen to Karen as she talks about the human quotient.
Thank you. Thank you, Lentil. And thank you both to Dr. Ajit and Sumatra too, because you've given me some great insights into your world, which I hope I can reflect a little bit in some of the human quotient pieces. When we think about human quotient, we think about how do we prepare ourselves for a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And when we live in that world, we need to understand what do we bring as human beings that no machine can ever replicate. So what makes us unique? And that's the thing that I would like to explore today. I'm speaking to you today from London, and we have been in lockdown because of COVID from the 19th of March. 13 weeks we've been in lockdown now. And one of my observations in having worked in over 200 companies in 30 countries on 5 continents is that the companies, the organizations that are responding well are those that can adapt. And interestingly, Dr. Ajit used the quote from Darwin, it's not the strongest, it's not the most intelligent, but it's the most adaptable of the species that can survive. And that's what we are as humans, we are adaptable. I'd like to just share a few slides to help me along in talking to you today. This is a quote from Leo Tolstoy. Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. And the reason that we are adaptable is because we can understand there are times that we need to change. And Yentel has said a number of times, the only constant in our world now is change. So what does it mean to be a human in an ever-changing world? And what is it that we have that makes us unique in that world? What I would like to talk to you about is emotional intelligence, a component of which is how we learn. But the root of emotional intelligence is the ability to understand ourselves, our strengths, our preferences, our skills, but also our gaps. What do we need to learn? It's also about how we understand others. So let me talk a little bit more about emotional intelligence and also why it matters so much. Emotional intelligence is the root of what it is to be human. It's the thing that distinguishes us from any other species and from a machine. It begins with an understanding of ourselves. And when we think about how we learn or where we want to be in the world, we need to first understand what we have to offer, what are our skills, our strengths, our preferences, but also to pick up on the point that Sumitra made, it's also about our willingness to be curious, to be humble, and to be willing to learn. So first we need to understand ourselves, then we need to understand others. Again, we are unique in being able to understand the cues and the clues that others demonstrate. We are uniquely positioned to create understanding and insight in relationships, and those are critical in being successful in any organization. In the bottom left, you'll see something called self-management. That again is a very unique emotion, a core part of the human quotient. It is an ability to control our emotions, to manage impulse, to be able to think about the future and not to go for the instant gratification, but to think about the long term. What do we want from our career? How do we manage ourselves in order to achieve that? Because what we can then do is, if we understand ourselves, if we understand others such that we can build relationships, if we can control our own emotions, we can choose the skills that we use in work, and the social skills of being able to work together, to build relationships, to collaborate, to build trust, and to do that in a way that provides influence and leadership. Now, why would that matter? Because what we know from our research over the last almost 50 years is that when we have high levels of emotional intelligence, it impacts our ability to do well, not just at work, but in life. And here are just a couple of thoughts for you. And I'm hoping that this might be recognizable to Dr. Ajit. But when the original research in Harvard was done on emotional intelligence, the researchers followed a number of doctors at the Massachusetts General Hospital. And one of the things that they found is that those doctors who had emotional intelligence, so an ability to understand themselves and others, to manage their impulses, and to choose the right kind of leadership and influencing, had 1/3 better outcomes. So fewer patients returning, better recovery rates. And also we heard a little bit when we talked about the learning quotient, about Google and what matters to Google. And absolutely it is about learning and curiosity, but they also now recruit on emotional intelligence with a view that we can teach you anything else. We can teach you technology, we can teach you the kind of skills that are required to do well, but we need emotional intelligence. And then we come to COVID-19. So when I look at the organizations that are succeeding in COVID-19, it's the organizations that are able to reimagine a future. And the organizations that I am working with have moved from seeing a crisis to seeing an opportunity. And an opportunity, I looked up the definition of both before coming here today. A crisis, a time of great danger, difficulty, or confusion, when problems must be solved or important decisions must be made. And then the opportunity, the definition, a time when a particular situation makes it possible to do or achieve something. When we look at the human quotient, it is the ability to bridge the gulf and the gap between a crisis and to recognize that it's an opportunity. It is the combination of having integrity, authenticity, insight, and imagination, none of which we can see in a machine. So our ability to work compatibly with technology is dependent on us recognizing the value of what it is to be human. I have one last thing I would like to leave you with, and it builds on the previous insight into learning. And when we look at attitude and humanity and what it is to be human, we look at the way in which we've seen human growth and our ability to learn and our ability to adapt. In the 20th century, we needed a fixed mindset. We needed experts who could reproduce what they know. And it was about perfection and repetition. As we moved into the 21st century, we needed a growth mindset, a combination of curiosity and humility, where we focus on improving how we do what we do and believe in the strengths that can be developed to reach higher levels of achievement. What we have now in a highly volatile and uncertain world is the need for a benefit mindset, which is the recognition that as a leader, you need to be well and do good, to live with values, to have emotional intelligence, and to believe in developing meaningful contributions. Great leaders and great humans make a contribution not just for themselves, but beyond, which is what I believe TalentEase is doing with you today. So I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was great. I mean, there were a lot of points that absolutely resonated, I'm sure. I mean, with me, definitely, but I'm sure with every one of our students that are watching right now, because there's so many points that you brought out that we speak about as well. So great to know. Thank you for sharing. I just have one question for you. We're talking about skills, but I think we miss out the value part a lot of times. You deal with people at executive levels, different boards, different levels and different kinds of people at huge companies, Barclays, Virgin Atlantic, to name a few. We at TalentEase, again, we don't just do skills, we also do values. And that's one part, and we call it values in practice. So we're not just doing a value in class, we're also practicing it. What would you say are some of the values that are unchanging, whether it's a person from here, there, upper position, lower, doesn't matter. What are some of the values that should be unchanging?
It's a great question, because I think when you look at organizations now, the importance of values has never been greater, and the recognition that someone who comes with the right values makes a far greater contribution has never been greater. And Dr. Ajit talked about compassion, and I think if you look at the kind of values that we look for in any walk of life, compassion is very high. I think we also look at the ability to treat any other individual with dignity, with respect, in the way that you would want to be treated yourself. And I think also, just to pick up again on the learning quotient piece, I think the value of humility and curiosity and a willingness to learn is incredibly important. I'm minded that the country that has had the best response to COVID-19 is New Zealand. And I don't know if your students know that there is only one value in the New Zealand government, and it is be kind. That strikes me as a pretty good value.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just one last question, and this was an audience question that came in through registration. How do you deal with failure? How do you deal with a tough situation? What do you do?
Well, I'm better now than I was when I was a student. I think learning to live with failure and indeed embrace failure comes with maturity, I think. I wish I'd known at the age some of your students are the great benefits of failure. What I would say is, unless you try, you'll never achieve anything. And if you try, sometimes you'll fail. One of my clients is James Dyson, who invented the Dyson vacuum cleaner. And in their reception, they have a quote and a picture. And it's all about, he had 241 failures before he actually had a success. And it took him almost 17 years. And what he said he learned was just to fail better and faster. And the mantra they have in Dyson is, no one is blamed for failure. We all learn from failure. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for your insight. Keeping the technology, learnability, and human quotients in mind, let's work on our aspirations and not dwell on our fears. Thank you, Dr. Ajit, Sumitra, and Karen, for connecting these three spheres with the vital skills to make that shift from the classroom to the workplace. As we come towards the end of the webinar, we have one last common question for all three of our speakers. We at TalentEase will be launching a segment on our portal called Mentor Space. It's a space where students can come online and get connected with individuals who are from the world at work, people who have reached good positions, and who can guide children for careers, right? So career guidance. And we have life coaches who can help on your strengths, your interests, to pursue an interest or pursue a goal. We can also get advice from counselors on various areas that children and students are struggling with today. With this in mind, and Dr. Ajit talked about it earlier, can the three speakers of ours, can you give us one mentor, is someone who is, there for you, who's your voice of reason and your support and guidance, has been and is still. One mentor, if each of you could mention, please. Dr. Ajit, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. It's tough to pick one person. When you train for 15 years, you end up picking up a lot of mentors. And in a surgical field, mentors are everything. Even today, I think of Dr. McGilvery at Mass General, Dr. Schmaltz at University of Missouri, and Dr. Kilparty at St. John's. They all even if you don't have a tough situation, you just think, what would Dr. McGilvery do in this situation? It will help answer the question. And I've been right about 90% of the time, and so it's very important to have that mentor, and it's great you're providing that space. But if I were to pick one person, I'd probably pick my mother. Someone I can call all the time, and someone who has your best interest in mind. And so I think the space, though, is extremely valuable to provide experts to answer any particular question you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Sumitra?
Hi. So I don't quite have a crisp answer for you.
Okay.
I have sought out mentors and benefited from them a lot in most of my the companies that I've been with. My view on this now is, and hopefully it'll resonate with some of the people joining the workforce soon. You ought to seek out a mentor in every firm that you join. The mentor does not have to be in your direct chain of command. I have found tremendous value from mentors that I have had in completely unrelated fields. When I sat in technology and I had a mentor who was the chief human resource officer, just that perspective that is so different from what you learn from your own chain of command is beneficial. The other thing which hopefully you can keep in mind and try to take forward with you, a mentor is not one, or should not be one, to just help and guide and mentor you in that firm. It should go beyond it. Even today, one of my mentors, and I don't want to mention him because I don't want to insult the other mentors, he's retired. I still call him to bounce ideas off and get his guidance. The fact that he is no longer actively employed is irrelevant. The knowledge that he has stays, and that knowledge is transferable. He doesn't know my current company. He doesn't know my last 3 companies, but he can still give me insights that help me with these firms. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Karen?
A bit like Sumitra, I've sought someone at every point in my life, but I thought one of the ones I would actually share is the first person I realised was a mentor, and my economics teacher at school was Mr. Robertson. And I came from a very poor background, and Mr. Robertson was the first person who said I should have the self-belief to go to university. And all he did was encourage me to think for myself and believe that I could do something. And he has stayed on my shoulder for the last 40 years.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Definitely something to take back is that no matter how old, young, we are always learning, and we always, need a voice out there that can help us through it. Thank you. Do share your feedback with us on the chat window so that, we can better our service to you and come up. I mean, we want to do a lot more webinars, a lot more workshops. So do log on to TalentEase.com to get to know us better. A humongous thank you to the TalentEase team for making all of this happen, for being so calm and just making it work and making it amazing. We did it in 1 hour. Great job, team. Thank you. Thank you to our speakers again. Audience, have a great rest of the day. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you on the next webinar. Adios.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.